All right. So today we have my old friend, a seasoned venture investor and advisor to global corporations, Evangelos Simoudis. He is the managing partner at Synapse Partners, and they invest in startups that develop enterprise applications that exploit big data and AI. And I've been wanting to get him on the podcast, but now we have an excuse because he has a new book called The Flagship Experience. And this book discusses how software defined vehicles and AI enable automakers and the transportation sector reimagine mobility. So, with that long winded introduction, welcome to the Data Exchange Podcast, Evangelist.
And it's really good to be here, and thank you for your kind words. And you and I know each other for a while, so it's good to have a conversation among friends.
Yeah, so we'll focus on enterprise AI, but as by way of introduction, uh, I love the subject of your book, and it reminds me actually of something an old friend of mine, Jeff Jonas, who has built, I think, what is the best entity resolution system out there today. And at first, I thought, well, this is kind of a old problem, entity resolution. But then when you drill down and you look at all the things they had to do in order to do it in scale, in real time, so it can learn and so on and so forth. So your book reminds me of that in the sense that, all right, so enterprise mobility, but isn't the hot thing LLMs and generative AI? But then when you look at all the problems that you have to have in solved in order to do enterprise mobility, right? So real time sense learning from sensors, uh, different vehicles or different devices communicating with each other. There's a lot of details that I think sometimes we're lost in this world of LLMs, of text in, text out. We forget there's so many interesting, complex systems out there, right?
That's right. So this book is the third installment, if you will, of work that I started and published back in 2017. So my first book. So all my books deal with AI and mobility. The first book was about AI in driverless mobility. The second book was about the new value chains that are established when mobility services companies, cities, and automakers come together to operate multimodal mobility systems. This book actually focuses more on the automaker, and I discuss how the combination of software-defined vehicles, in conjunction with all the capabilities that AI gives us, enables automakers to offer a new customer experience that covers both what's happening in the cabin of the vehicle, but also outside of the cabin. And as it turns out, and this is where the AI comes to play, in order to be able to do this, you need to understand the customer in way, the user of the vehicle, who may not be the customer, by the way, if you're talking about car sharing or applications like this. Um, it requires me to understand the user of the vehicle in ways that we have never done before. And the AI, whether it is generative or discriminative, uh, plays a particularly central role in this understanding because, as you said very, very correctly, the data that you need to bring together, data about behaviors, data about the vehicle and its behavior, and all the data that it collects from the sensors that it has, from the transportation infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, all of that needs to be fused together if you are to have a comprehensive view and be able to serve that user, that human user, in the best possible way.
And this use case has so many interesting elements, right? So there's real time, there's sensor fusion, there's multimodality, uh, there's the hybridization of, perception, reasoning, and rules. Uh, it's just super interesting. Uh, and then safety is paramount, right?
Yes, and it has different manifestations because if you think about it, the fleet manager, the person who is operating, let's say, delivery vans, has a very different set of use cases and very different way of understanding the user of that vehicle than the consumer, you and I, how we use our vehicle, right? And as I said, the importance to this work is not only the AI, but the fact that you have the so-called software-defined vehicles, which not only are big data generators, but they also have in their pure form the ability to be modified using software at very detailed ways.
Yeah, yeah. As an avid Waymo rider, although I still use Uber because there's still many scenarios where Uber actually makes more sense. But I do like riding Waymo. It's just amazing. It's an amazing experience. And one of my favorite things to do now, Evangelist, is whenever someone visits me from out of town, I go, "You want to meet?" And then they come and meet me, and then I go, "Let's go meet inside a Waymo." And then I just take a Waymo with my friend, and then we stop multiple places without getting out of the car, right? So, because basically it's like a conference room that moves because there's no driver, you can talk freely.
Exactly.
Yeah, 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 yeah. All right, so let's now take some of what you learned from the transportation sector. And as we talk about enterprise AI, feel free to work many of those lessons in. So I guess, first of all, we're now 1 year past the release of ChatGPT. So generative AI and these foundation models are kind of the rage these days. So from your perspective as an investor and an advisor to large companies, Evangelist, so what are the most promising and exciting new enterprise applications of generative AI that for yourself, that you're most excited about?
So first of all, just to give a little bit of context, our firm works with and advises a variety of corporations, primarily from the mobility industry, but not exclusively. Okay, so mobility, I mean both mobility services, logistics, and automotive, but not exclusively. And I will also say, for context building purposes, that I've been in AI since roughly 1982. So I've seen a number of these waves of excitement, followed by less excitement, followed by despair in some
And by
cases.
the way, for our listeners, Evangelist is has a PhD in computer science, so it's not a regular VC.
So I would say that even corporations that had long established AI groups, they were taken by surprise by the introduction of generative AI capabilities. Today, I would say that most of them have gone from individual employees using that in their spare time, using whether it is ChatGPT or other LLMs, um, to starting a more disciplined experimentation. And again, depending on the industry, the discipline experimentation can be around document summarization and interaction with corpora. Programming of variety of forms has also emerged as a strong application. And then there is I would call it a hodgepodge of creative applications, whether it is creating emails, creating summaries, creating shorter form documents that that are useful either within the enterprise or between enterprise and its customers. So one of the things that has really, and I've written a little bit about this, but one of the things that has really surprised me is that if you were to hear it from the VC point of view, you would think that the enterprise has already adopted and has allocated huge budgets towards particularly towards generative AI. When what we see from the enterprises, and by the way, we also talk to large management consulting firms and the like, I would say that the 2024 will be characterized as a year of generative AI experimentation, where there is money being spent, but not tremendous amounts of money. There is some modest additions to existing AI budgets, and but what is important for 24 will be for these groups, these enterprise groups that are experimenting to show good results, so that by the time that the next budget cycle comes towards the end of this year, we will really see the important and sizable allocations for 2025. So I would say 24 is this transition type of a year.
Question for you, Evangelos. So if you look at budgets in large companies, right? So obviously, let's take one area, cybersecurity. They have a well-defined, healthy budget, but some of that budget can be used for AI. So how do you distinguish between AI budget in the centralized AI group versus AI budgets in other groups?
Look, we are looking both as investors for our portfolio companies, but also whether companies are going out of the ordinary, in a sense, in order to allocate money that was not there previously to devote explicitly for certain tasks that we will where only an AI solution will be applied, right? So a good example is, okay, can I start a project where I will do certain types of programming using generative AI approaches, and how much money can be allocated to that end? That's what I'm saying, that this type of allocations are not yet where one would have you believe. But there is a lot of AI, and look, my last comment here is that AI is not new for the enterprise, right? The enterprises have been using AI for a very long time, and every year they have been allocating their budget, particularly for what we now call discriminative AI tasks. The question is whether the introduction of generative AI is causing a major change in that budgetary cycle. That's what I've been looking at.
So generative AI is probably one of the first manifestations of AI where non-programmers, managers, CXOs can have hands-on experience. And I imagine the problem is not identifying potential use cases, right? So is proving out that the AI is justifiable for those use cases. Because I think sometimes we forget that we still have to put these projects under the same kind of lens as any other project, right? Which is like a typical big data or data science project, do I have the data for automation, right? So do I have the scale to justify automation, right? So do I have the tools and talent to actually execute on the automation? And actually, it reminds me I guess, by the time this comes out, this paper will be released, but I was just shared a paper from MIT where they looked at computer vision in particular, right? So they looked at many different computer vision tasks. And what they found is, okay, we're at the point where many of these tasks can be automated, but we're identifying uh, fewer tasks than you would expect where the automation is economically makes sense, right?
Exactly. Let me give you actually an example.
Yeah.
Last week we had CES, right? So CES this year was all about AI. AI and maybe if you're focusing on the automotive industry and software-defined vehicles. Okay, but let's focus on the AI. Every demo had something built around ChatGPT. Now, as you prefaced before, I do have pretty good background in computer science, and in every demo that I went to and tried to poke a little bit and say, okay, well, tell me what's underneath here, right? You're demonstrating some capability. In most cases, it was a kludged together demo where ChatGPT, not even GPT-4, just ChatGPT was the front end. But the demo was sweeping under the rug many of the serious issues that will have to be addressed before what was being demonstrated can actually become a scalable system that can get in the hands of the intended users, right? Whether it is cost of the context window, whether it is the cost of communication, whether it is the cost of update. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All of these issues were, not only were not being discussed, but I'm not even certain, based on the people that at least I spoke to from a variety of companies, they have been considered. So we have a long ways to go.
So let's take at face value your thesis, which is this is the year of experimentation, right? So it's a two-sided market, this era of experimentation. You have the companies who want to do the experimentation, and then, as you know, we're in the Bay Area, the startups who are building the picks and shovels to enable companies to adopt these technologies. So let's start with the companies first. So what can the companies do in order to either restructure themselves or organize themselves in order for their experiments to be, let's say, more productive or systematic?
So the first thing that we are advising is that they need to decide and define what will constitute value. And many of them have not defined that. They need to, then to your earlier point, they need to identify the tasks that will provide that value, right? So the value may be faster, doing something faster, doing something cheaper, doing something, in more alternatives. But it needs to be defined. And they need to identify a small number of tasks, in my opinion, where that value can be demonstrated in unquestionable ways. Because you don't want to come to the end of the year and having, let's say, the group that was driving that experimentation trying to convince you, oh, yes, this is indeed value, and trying to split hairs around that. I mean, there has to be unquestionable that, yes, if we achieve that, that will warrant scalability, okay? In the process, they also will need to determine what are the issues that will need to be addressed, and what is in the course of scaling, and what issues can be addressed during the experimentation, because maybe you don't want to create a customized LLM customized meaning by fine-tuning or whatever a foundation model. Maybe you don't want to create as a first pass your own LLM or SLM, but you need to have clear criteria for success. And in our case, we're trying to help corporations do that. I know others are doing the same. But we're also seeing a lot of situations of very haphazard experimentation.
So Evangelos, experimentation maybe, so traditionally, right? So if you look at AI and data science, so over the last few years, so these teams have started using tools for experimentation, right? So whatever they might be, right? So ML flow or weights and biases, whatever, right? And then there's another group of people inside companies who have a long tradition of experimentation, right? So the people who are doing A/B testing. And some companies have formal experimentation platforms, Netflix, Booking.com, and there's whole books written about how having an experimentation mindset and experimentation tools and experimentation platform really helps companies. So in the era of generative AI, you can imagine all sorts of people doing experiments. Maybe they are stepping on each other, maybe they are duplicating efforts. So is this an opening for someone to kind of build something to help companies track what they're doing?
You know, in the mid 90s, I was running a division at IBM that was responsible for deploying AI and analytics globally. And at that time, there was, AOL email was starting to become broadly available. And I remember many IBM employees coming to the company and saying, well, I have AOL at home and I can communicate with my relatives, my friends, whatever. Why don't I have something like this at work, right? Because the email systems that we had at that time were extremely rigid and painful to use. And the CIOs were essentially pushed to start implementing email systems because their employees were coming and saying, hey, I have a better email at home than I have in my work. I think something like this is happening right now with generative AI. I mean, you have people who are saying, I can experiment at home and I can ask all sorts of questions and I can do things that I never thought I would be able to do with a computer, collaborate. Why can't I do this for my business tasks? So when I talk about, so what we saw during 23 in particular, particularly the second half of 23, was a lot of that, right? Where employees were saying, I am doing things on my own volition, right? Maybe I even paid a subscription to OpenAI to use a personal copy of personal subscription. Why can't we do this at work? So what we're starting to see, well, we started to see it towards the end of 23, but now what I'm claiming is that we're going to see it a lot more in 24, is that corporations are saying, let's not do this haphazardly. Let's start to define some things where we believe generative AI is going to be important for our corporation, to achieve our goals, to achieve our objectives. And now what I'm adding to that is, okay, let's define what is going to be the value of it, right? Maybe you're already using AI and you're already getting value out of it. What is generative AI going to give you more that your existing approaches are not giving you, right? So that's what I keep talking about, defining and then applying.
But I guess going back to this notion of, so in other areas, like the people who develop websites, right? So they developed experimentation platforms and experimentation tools so that they know exactly what works, what doesn't. You can go to log in and say, hey, Evangelos already tried this. It doesn't work. And by the way, here's everything Evangelos used when he did try to automate this task. Here's the data set, here's the prompts, here's the responses, right? So what are some opportunities for startups who want to help companies get better at what you're saying, which is this
Yeah.
experimentation era?
So I think that, and this is something that we've seen in the companies, in the investor proposals, if you will, that we have been receiving over the last year. We have seen essentially three classes of proposals, three classes of plans. On one side, we've seen a lot of infrastructure related investment opportunities, right? Vector databases, model building systems, MLOps, whatever. The second category are tools for, I call them thin veneers around a foundation model, a variety of chatbots. And then the third category is applications that are agent-like. And when I talk about agent, I'm trying to be very specific. I mean, they deal with memory, they deal with reasoning, they deal with learning, all of that.
Function calling.
I'm sorry?
Function calling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so what we have been, we've looked at a number of the infrastructure. On the infrastructure side, there are opportunities, but there's also, over the past year, we've seen a lot of overcrowding of that market. On the chatbot side, we saw a tremendous number of companies, which, frankly, as the large, whether it is Google, whether it is OpenAI, whether it is Anthropic, as they started releasing more and more of their capabilities, these companies that had the so-called chatbots, their offerings were looking less and less attractive, or superseded by what the larger companies were offering. On the agent side, I think the problems are much harder, but that's where I think there is a huge opportunity to create value for the enterprise, right? Where you can identify a task, you can and try to automate that task, whether it is programming, whether it is report generation, whatever. But where you realize from the beginning that just your simple connection to a foundation model, to an LLM, is not going to be the end all. Maybe, in fact, and I wrote this in one of my blogs, maybe the LLM is going to be 20% of the overall system, right? Because you have to add a lot more to it in order to provide that complete solution. So I believe that, again, as corporations are starting to determine what are the tasks where generative AI in particular has a high probability of helping me, and what is the value that I will expect to see from such a system, there is an opportunity to work with startups to define these agents that will be used hopefully on a repeated basis, and hopefully on a frequent repeated basis, in order to accomplish something that is of high value to the corporation.
So I have three areas I want to explore with you, right? So the first is, I guess, domain specificity, right? So a year or so ago, a friend of mine and I looked at, we kind of were getting frustrated with the term unicorn. So we go, let's look at the companies that actually have 100 million in revenue. Let's call them pegacorns. And when we looked at that list, both on the AI side and on the data side, we found a lot of them were kind of vertical focused companies, right? So question number one, I guess this is one of my pet peeves. since we're here in Silicon Valley, everyone is building things for their friends, and their friends are engineers who don't pay for anything, right? So, but there's actually a lot of opportunities in verticals. But the problem with verticals, of course, is first of all, you have to make a selection. And then secondly, you should be interested in it because it's hard to devote several years of your life if you're not inherently interested in that vertical. So what do you think about vertically focused solutions? Is it too early?
No, I actually, I'm a big believer of that, and I'll give you said earlier, we tried to talk a little bit about it as well. If you look at, so I'm a big proponent of vertical applications, AI or not AI. We said earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about the book as well. If you look at what it takes to develop an intelligent customer understanding system for mobility, right? To provide the right customer experience to the user of the software-defined vehicle, there's a tremendous amount of vertical knowledge that needs to be incorporated into that application. And in fact, this was the statement I was making earlier about the CES. It was exactly this, because you will go to the booths of these automakers and they will show you a rudimentary demo around ChatGPT, and I would tell them that I would realize right away that in order for this to scale and to be able to respond in the right way, you need to incorporate a lot of domain knowledge about traffic, knowledge about weather, knowledge about places of interest, knowledge about mapping, all sorts of things, right? To be able to be useful to the user of that application, right? So again, the problem that I see today is that there's a tendency to say, well, there's some low-hanging fruit. Let's go ahead and pick them up and apply generative AI. That may be good for demonstration purposes. That will not be good to show long-term value. So to show the long-term value, you need to understand what is going to be that vertical application. Now, there might be, very much like we saw with whether it is Salesforce automation and other type of applications, certain applications may emerge to be more generic, right? Okay, so Microsoft is applying copilots to Office. Well, Office is a horizontal application, right? Programming is a horizontal task. But I think by and large, we will find that it is, we will need to go into deep domain knowledge in order to offer the right value for this around generative AI.
Yeah, because if you think through, for example, medical healthcare applications, it's very domain specific, the text, the language that's used, right?
Exactly.
And that's true for many domains. All right. So second point, if you look at, forget about generative AI 2023, but in the before times, 2022 and earlier, so the preceding 5 years, you had two parallel kind of areas where people were building companies and investing. The first one is data engineering, new next generation tools for ETL, ELT, data orchestration, and so on and so forth. The other one was ML ops, right? So, I mean, clearly there's a lot more interesting data engineering startups standing, right? So whatever they might be, DBT, Fivetran, Matillion, and so on and so forth. I think too many people right now, Evangelos, are building in the, let's say, LLM orchestration or, fine-tuning LLMs. No one is paying attention to ETL or data for these applications, which are mostly unstructured. And what do I mean by that, right? So look at retrieval augmented generation, right? So in order to build that system, first of all, you have to decide what's my data. Secondly, how do I extract that data from my data sources? If it's PDF files, which PDF extraction library should I use? There's 20 of them. If it's OCR, which OCR library should I use? And then there's chunking, there's the embeddings, right? So, and then you have search and information retrieval. But clearly the ETLs could you, and then if it's web pages, how do I crawl these web pages, right? And so on and so forth. So on the other hand, most people are focused on just kind of, I guess the easier part is what I'm thinking. This part is fundamental, but hard.
Yeah, data ingestion and even result.
And it's new data types, right? So the generation of companies that I was alluding to were focused on lake houses and warehouses, right? So,
what's your question?
No. My question to you is: do you think this is an interesting area for startups?
So if you were to look at even if you look AI aside, even if we take AI aside, and you look at analytic tasks around data, dating back to the 80s, right? So 40-year history, you'll see that first people were focusing on a report generation, kind of like how do I present results, and then when people started asking for more of the same. Well, I like this report. I have 100 other reports that I want to generate. Can you do the same thing, the same magic that you did for this one report? Can you do it for the 99 others that I have on my pipeline? That's when they started thinking about what systems do I need to put behind in order for me to go from the one report to the 100 reports. And concepts such as data warehousing and ETL that goes to the data warehousing started, and then data warehousing became data marts, and the data marts became lake houses and all of that, right? So if you look at this kind of evolution, you will see that the data ingestion problem always came at the end, right? Rather than coming at the beginning. I want to predict that something like this will happen this time around as well. So in other words, during, again, this experimentation phase, when companies will say, you know what, I cannot just use vanilla GPT-4. I need to augment it with my own product data, with my own particular data, and create a proprietary version. Well, I can do it with 100 documents, but by golly, I have 100,000 documents. Now, how do I do that? That's what's going to drive demand for the type of tooling that we don't have today. But unfortunately, if a startup were to go today to a corporation and say, we have the generative AI ingestion tooling that you will need, I don't think it will get the attention because everybody's paying, well, okay, how do I create a vector database? How do I create, what will be the result of me doing RAG as opposed to just using a vanilla model? So that's my.
By the way, so there is a way to prove this out quickly. And the reason I got interested in this, by the way, is my own experience, which is basically, building simple RAG applications. Obviously, you can get value right off the bat. But then I happened to, on a few occasions, build these things for PDF files where I actually knew the PDF files well. And that's when you realize, hey, this pipeline that I'm using is missing a lot of information that's not being extracted from these PDF files, right? So what you have to do is go into a company and have them give you PDF files that they know really well, and then prove out this
I mean, look,
concept.
we have been trying to determine whether we have been building within our firm, we have been building what we call a location knowledge graph, essentially a knowledge base that sits on top of POI databases and mapping databases so that we can reason about location. And we've been trying to determine how far we can go with generative AI and what kind of inputs we need to provide. It hasn't been an exercise left to the reader. It's been hard work.
Yeah. So my next question, let's tackle it in two levels, right? So the question is basically what can slow down the momentum of generative AI, right? So first, let's do that within a company. So inside the company, Evangelos, what can slow down momentum?
The inappropriate matching between expectations and what can be attained. This has always been, I mean, this has nothing to do with generative AI. If you look at the previous 3 AI sprints, from that I participated in, from the rule-based systems of the 80s to neural networks to deep neural networks to today generative AI, what has been the Achilles heel is always over-promising beyond what the state of the systems could deliver. So, and that's why I'm saying, particularly during this year, it will be important for corporations to say, here's what is of value, here's how we're going to define value, and here's how we're going to conduct this experiment to take us to see if we really get the value.
So that's just so Evangelist, are you recommending to companies that they let's see, so do they need new people specifically? Like obviously a lot of these companies now have chief data officers, maybe some have chief data scientists or chief AI officer. So what is there any new way to organize yourself? No.
No, I don't think so. I think there is from an organization perspective. So no new people. There's always need for more people with better experience. But I think you said something on organization, which I think is particularly important. And again, if I were to put a plug for my book, I devote an entire chapter on organizational transformations. You cannot have an AI group that is sitting isolated in some corporation, in some part of the corporation rather, thinking that they're doing something special. The most successful AI endeavors have been when the AI specialists, whether it is data scientists, whether it is researchers, have been embedded in the business, and they have used the problems that they see in the business to apply AI and provide solutions that without AI could not be attained. But I'm totally against having these specialized groups that sit on the side and they put the labels. I'm an AI center. I'm an AI group. They need to be embedded in the enterprise.
All right. So then let's take this question. What can slow down momentum more broadly, right? So let me give you a few straw man candidates, right? So first is obviously this new litigation around copyright and training data, possible, right? So secondly, I guess just lack of data, lack of compute, or generally lack of breakthroughs, right? So in terms of new AI models. And thirdly, I guess just the fact that maybe less access for companies in general, because if if these foundation models that are the most cutting edge get developed inside these private organizations that are increasingly secretive, maybe there's going to be less parallel developments in the open source, which means, at least for most companies, except for a handful, there'll be less momentum.
I will also, we can take it from the top of your list. I will also add regulation to your list.
Europe, right?
Well, even here to a certain extent, but
Yeah.
look, mine and our firm's thesis is that there are going to be a few general purpose LLMs, the so-called foundation models, and those will be like what we see today as the public clouds. We don't have 100 public clouds. We have 3 major ones, maybe 3.5. It depends how you're counting. Okay, so I think that is going to be the case for foundation models as well. I don't believe that it makes sense to have. We will not be able to have the resources to develop multiple, and there will be no need for that. Now, I think corporations in particular.
But are these handful, this 3 to 5 foundation models that you envision, will any of them be open source?
I think there's a very good chance that we will see at least one of them being open source. Okay. I think corporations.
In which case, Evangelos, right? So take that open source model, and I believe that the community will be able to rally behind this one open source model, and through apply whatever tricks that we've learned in computer vision, be it quantization, sparsification, pruning, and shrink that model and run it on a phone.
I could actually. I was going to say I was in a panel discussion before the holidays, and I've also said that I think we will very quickly realize that LLMs do not buy us as much as we think, and we will start converging towards a variety of SLMs. And once you make that transition, that mental transition, in conjunction with increasing horsepower of the compute power on your phone or on other devices, I do not see a reason why you will not have those running locally. Certainly, again, going back to the automotive industry, as we're thinking about putting 2 or 3 multi-teraflop computing processors in the car, I don't see a reason why you could not run these models locally, right? And even learn locally, not only run them to do inference, but also do certain types of learning. So I think that this will be so. If you also assume this, the next thing that you could expect is that the companies that provide these foundation models, right, the OpenAI class companies, because there will only be 2 or 3 of them, 4 of them, some small number, they will find a way to negotiate with the content providers so that they will not, so everything will be more or less legal, right? So that there will not be copyright issues because there will be the right agreements will be in place. I think that, by the way, is also going to give the comfort to the corporation that they will not run, because today one of the obstacles that we see in corporations is data provenance. And I think that's a big problem also for open source models, right? It's okay to say I'm using an open source model, but can you guarantee me that this model does not have data issues, copyright data security, whatever that the proprietary model ostensibly does not have. So I think that's how I expect that these issues will resolve. Now, I believe that once corporations that see the value of generative AI will very likely develop their own proprietary SLMs, LLMs, whatever you want to call them, and maybe MLMs, right? Medium-sized language models. And for that, they will need certain both infrastructure, software infrastructure of the type that we mentioned earlier, but also the right compute resources. One area that one government has asked us to advise them, they want to do work with data centers. I think it will be interesting to see how the architectures of the data centers that are focusing on AI tasks in general and generative AI in particular, they will need to be modified so that they can serve the right loads.
Yeah, and there we definitely are seeing some of them, some specialized clouds now emerging, right? So, and there'll be more. By the way, the term I use, which is not which doesn't roll off the mouth, is DCLLM, decentralized custom LLM. And with that, thank you, Evangelist.